Welcome to the Gladio Mori motion creation tutorial. Gladio Mori is an incredibly freeform and god-tier game, but it's true that motion creation can be tricky at first. One reason it feels hard for beginners is that there are just too many buttons. So today, I'll only highlight the ones you really need. As a beginner, you don't have to touch anything other than what I cover today. Once you get used to it, you'll naturally start using the other features. Let's dive into a live demo. I'd love it if you could launch Gladio Mori yourself and follow along. First, open the editor screen. Here, you'll see a list of movesets. You'll be doing things like copying and editing movesets here. For this tutorial, we'll copy the rapier moveset and edit that. Once you enter moveset editing through Select, you'll see something called a stance. I'll explain stances in detail later. For now, just edit the top stance. Inside the stance, you'll find a bunch of moves. The top one is the passive move, and the others are normal moves. Let's try editing the attack high. Now we're in the move editor. It might look overwhelming with all the buttons, but for now, you only need to focus on this part. Let's hide the rest. On the right, you see your ideal self, and on the left, your real self. The real self tries to follow the ideal, but since it's affected by physics, it can't do anything too unrealistic. Press play to preview the move. You can also click the timeline below to show a red line. This lets you check the pose at that moment in time. You can tell that this motion involves raising the sword first, then swinging it down. Try moving the blue parts your ideal self in this pose. Once you've made a pose you like, press Create Keyframe to save it to the timeline. Forgetting to press Create Keyframe is something everyone goes through. Make sure to press it often, or just use the S key frequently to save your poses. By saving a pose as a keyframe and placing it on the timeline, you create animation. Press play again or move the red line to review the motion. You can move keyframes on the timeline. Hold Shift to select a range, then move or copy them. Oh, and common shortcuts like Ctrl+C, Ctrl+Z, and Delete also work. Let's try something more advanced, a motion that pierces an enemy in midair. First, delete all the keyframes. Move the red line to around here, and make a pose where the sword is thrust upward. Don't forget to save the keyframe. That's the rough idea. Try fine-tuning the hand position and rotation or adjusting the keyframe positions. You can also move other parts of the body. Using other muscles effectively will make your motion much more powerful. Once you're satisfied, go back to the previous screen to test it. You can assign buttons here by clicking Listen and then pressing the button you want. Let's pause here. With what we've learned so far, you can create almost any one-handed motion. Try experimenting on your own before moving on to two-handed motions. Level 2. Let's move on to creating two-handed motions. Oh, and don't forget to save your progress before editing ends. We'll use a spear motion as an example. First, check out the passive move. The left hand is in a loose hold. That means it's not gripping the spear tightly, but instead holding it loosely so it can slide. By the way, if you leave the hold state blank, it continues from the previous state. So only change it if you want to switch grips. With two-handed weapons, I recommend making one hand a loose hold. Both hands tight or both loose is fine too, but this is the standard. When making two-handed techniques, it's important to align the left and right hands in a straight line. Coordinating both hands leads to powerful attacks. Here's where I introduce the super handy two-handed feature. Pressing it automatically aligns the wrists to form a straight line. This is just a handy feature, so you don't have to use it if you don't want to. When the light green bar appears, you can select it to move or rotate both hands together. Now let's make another anti-air attack. Press two-handed, then move the green bar to adjust. Looks good. That wraps up the two-handed tutorial. Let's pause again here. From here on out, the information gets more advanced, so take your time to experiment and explore on your own. Welcome to Level 3. We'll go into more detailed settings now, but please don't watch this until you've mastered the basics. Pressing this opens several options. These change how the move behaves when a button is pressed. Play at start and on click are rarely used, so let's skip those for now. If you set it to passive, it becomes a passive move that plays constantly when no buttons are pressed. Editing the passive move lets you create your stance pose. Make a stylish, unshakable stance. If you choose hold down, the move plays and then stops at the last keyframe as long as you keep the button held. This is probably the most useful one. Continuous makes the move loop as long as the button is held. Great for things like movement. You can change the motion's duration using the duration field in the bottom right. Next up is layers. Layers determine behavior when multiple buttons are pressed simultaneously. For now, set passive moves to layer 0 and everything else to layer 1 or higher. When keys are pressed at the same time, the move with the higher layer value takes priority. However, if you don't use the same joints, both motions can play at once. For example, if you make a move that only uses the lower body for walking and one for the upper body for attacking, you can walk while attacking. Mirror is a neat little feature. It flips everything you can see from left to right. This is useful when creating symmetrical movements. There's also a button to disable rig. This hides the blue boxes and lets you edit each joint angle individually. If you understand how joints work, this feature is super handy, so you'll likely end up using it more and more as you improve. Finally, let's talk about stances. To understand stances, you need to know the structure of a move set. A move set contains stances, and stances contain moves. Think of stances as poses or combat styles, and moves as attacks or walking motions. The move set is the file that holds them all together. The attacks we edited earlier count as moves. There are two types of moves, passive and normal. Only one passive move is allowed per stance. You can create as many stances as you want, which means you can include an almost infinite number of moves. You could even make a super warrior with over 100 techniques. Now let's look at how to switch stances. Press Add Stance here to create a stance switch. You can assign which button changes to which stance. If you choose hold down, the stance only switches while the button is held. For example, Shift plus L could trigger a right guard. If you choose on click, the stance switches with a single press. Great for switching combat styles on the fly. You can mostly leave this setting on default. It means any buttons not set in the new stance will carry over from the previous stance. So even if you change stances, you can still use the same walking moves from the original stance. And that's pretty much everything in the editor screen. It's a lot to take in at once, so take your time and learn it step by step. Once you're used to it, you'll be able to create motions 10 times faster, and make any motion you can imagine. With your own custom motions, you can become a warrior unlike any other in the world. I look forward to seeing you with your unique style in the arena.